Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Elena landed in the United States with her heart racing and her mind full of uncertainties. She walked through the airport gates with limited English and a nearly empty suitcase, but inside she carried all that was left of her hope. She didn't know anyone, not even the neighborhood she was supposed to go to, only an address scribbled on a piece of paper. She walked, took buses, asked for directions with gestures, and eventually arrived at the small rented room by the week, which barely fit a single bed and an old dresser. That was all she could afford. She spent the first few days knocking on company doors with a crumpled resume in hand, and amid dry rejections and suspicious looks, she eventually landed a simple job at a logistics warehouse, in the stockroom area. It was hard work, stacking boxes, sorting orders, organizing pallets. But she accepted without hesitation. She had come here with one goal: to start over. On her very first shift, she felt the impact of the fast pace and the language barrier. Almost no one spoke slowly to her, and instructions came quickly. When she made mistakes, the supervisors grew impatient, and her coworkers exchanged annoyed glances. Only one person truly reached out to her. David Mitchell. A man with a calm gaze, dark hair, discreet clothing, and a serene voice. He wasn't the type to grab attention right away. Most people didn't even notice him, but for Elena, he was a relief. He was the first to patiently explain how the inventory scanner worked. He showed her where they kept the replacement labels. He even shared his lunch with her during the first break. In the following days, David stayed close by, helping in a simple way without being intrusive. He had a shy sense of humor, the kind that made silly jokes but somehow made her laugh. It lightened the weight of the hours. Elena wasn't someone who trusted easily, but she felt safe around him. It was the first time since arriving in the country that she felt any lightness. Their friendship grew naturally, the kind where you understand each other with just a look. They shared stories. She talked about her childhood in Moldova, the fields where she ran with her siblings, her mother who sold bread at the market. David listened to everything attentively, asked for details, smiled as if he knew every piece of her story. He told her that he had lived alone for years, that he had once been engaged, but life had taken different turns. He was the kind of man who gave himself slowly but fully when he trusted. The days turned into weeks. David started waiting for her at the bus stop, bringing an extra coffee. She reciprocated with simple cakes she baked at night, sharing them with him during breaks. When they began spending time together outside of work, the connection between them became even more evident. They walked through the park, went grocery shopping together, and although nothing had been said, they already acted like a couple. At one point, Elena was the one who took the initiative to define what she felt. She wanted to build something with him, she wanted stability. And more than that, there was a strong reason to speed up this bond: her immigration status. She feared being deported if she lost her job or if the rules changed. So she spoke to him honestly. She told him she loved him but also needed security. David fell silent for a moment. Then he held her hand and replied that if there was one thing he could offer her, it was exactly that. Stability, affection, and a home. The wedding took place at the city courthouse, without big celebrations or guests. Just the two of them and two witnesses provided by the office. Elena wore a simple dress, her eyes shining. David wore a light-colored shirt and that smile that made her feel at home. After the ceremony, they ate burgers at the corner diner and went back together to the small apartment he had rented for years. For the first time, she had a place she could call her own in the United States. And she truly believed she was building something pure and lasting. David, on the other hand, felt that life was finally giving him back the love he had waited so long for. They slept that night holding hands, with the feeling that they were starting a new chapter. Little did they know that this first step, so full of promises, hid a much deeper plan behind it. Their routine remained peaceful during the first months of marriage. David felt fulfilled, making sure to take care of the household bills, the weekly groceries, and ensuring that Elena lacked nothing. He believed this was the beginning of a life he had waited so long for. Elena, for her part, maintained the same calm and attentive smile, always with some excuse for the delays, the messages in Moldovan on her phone, or the moments when she preferred to be alone in the room. David, even noticing these small distances, avoided feeding suspicion. He thought it was just a matter of adjustment, of time for her to feel completely comfortable. He never wanted to pressure her, respected the silences, and accepted her lack of contact with her family as something cultural. Whenever he asked, she said her relationship with her relatives was distant, that she had drifted apart from them at a young age due to misunderstandings, and that keeping her distance was a conscious choice. Even with natural curiosity, David chose to trust. He told himself that her past didn't matter, that what they had was real, that daily gestures proved it. When he saw Elena carefully preparing his lunchbox or brushing her hand across his face before sleeping, he preferred to believe that this was love. What he didn't notice was how she avoided meeting his colleagues, how she dodged more personal questions, or how she never mentioned any names from her childhood. Her entire story seemed to be made of shadows, loose fragments that didn't quite fit together. One day, while tidying up the kitchen, Elena casually mentioned that her brother, Ion, was planning to come to the United States. She said he was tired of the difficult life in Moldova, that he dreamed of starting over. David was surprised, since until then she had said she didn't maintain family ties. He asked if they had reconnected, and she replied that they had simply resumed contact through messages, but that he needed help. She also said she didn't want him staying in a hotel, that it would only be temporary, until he found a job and got settled. David, unsure how to refuse something so basic, agreed. In his mind, this might be a chance for Elena to reconnect with her roots. Maybe even a way to understand more about his wife through her brother. He prepared the guest room with good intentions. He changed the bed sheets, cleaned the closet, and even set aside some clothes that might fit Ion. Ion's arrival happened on a Friday afternoon. Elena had left work early to pick him up. When they entered the apartment together, David extended his hand, trying to smile and be cordial, but what he received was a dry handshake. Ion was tall, dark-haired, with intense eyes and a confidence that seemed excessive for someone who had just arrived in a new country. During dinner, he responded little, complimented the food without much emotion, and looked at Elena as if sharing secrets without saying a word. David tried to make conversation, asking about Moldova, about work plans, but the answers were short, almost uncomfortable. It felt like every attempt at closeness was blocked by an invisible wall. Still, he persisted because he wanted to be kind. In the following weeks, their behavior began to weigh heavily in the house. When they were together with David, they spoke little, almost always in English. But as soon as he left the room, laughter erupted. Once, when he returned early from the store, he heard them laughing loudly in the bedroom. As soon as they opened the door and saw him, they suddenly became serious. Elena said they were watching old videos from their childhood. Another time, when he arrived from work, he found Ion leaving the bathroom in a towel and Elena inside the bedroom with the door slightly open. They pretended everything was normal, but David felt uncomfortable. This happened more than once. He started paying closer attention. Their glances lasted too long. Conversations ended as soon as he approached. Their body language was different, looser, more intimate than expected between siblings. It was as if they were two people who had reunited after a long time and regained a deep connection. One morning, David left for work with a heavy chest. He tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, but the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers was constant. He was a rational, calm man, but he was starting to lose control of his own intuition. Something was off, and the more he tried to convince himself otherwise, the clearer it became. Doubts had already settled in, and the trust that had sustained their relationship was beginning to crack. Everything he had built, all the care, the affection, the patience, now weighed under the gaze between two people who never seemed like siblings. And although there was still no proof, David's heart already understood that this story was about to collapse. David and Elena worked at the same company but on different shifts. While he started early, she only came in during the afternoon. That morning, David woke up feeling unwell, with a heavy head and persistent nausea. Even so, he decided to go to work. He tried to ignore the discomfort, but not even the medicine helped. The production line was on pause in his mind, which was already overwhelmed by thoughts dragging on for weeks. Around noon, he requested leave from his supervisor and was let go. He didn't text Elena, who at that time was still at home getting ready for work. He just grabbed his things and left. He walked as if something was pulling him back, a premonition that made his chest tighten. He was tired of feeding suspicions, of feeling paranoid about things that might not even exist. But even as he tried to ignore it, there was something about that day that seemed to scream for him to return. And he listened. He arrived quietly. He opened the door slowly, dropped his backpack next to the couch, and went straight to the kitchen. He heard footsteps, muffled voices. He stopped at the entrance and, for a second, thought about calling her name. But something stopped him. He took a step forward. And there, in front of him, was the scene that until then had only been a suffocated suspicion. Elena, with her hands on Ion's face, was kissing him as if she no longer needed to hide anything. David's world went dark for a few seconds. Time didn't stop, but he felt as if it had frozen. His wife. The man she claimed was her brother. In the kitchen where they had dined together so many times. The sound of his breathing alerted them. Elena pulled back immediately, her face pale, her eyes wide. Ion turned to the side, as if looking for an exit. But David was there, standing, unable to look away. He asked in a hoarse voice, "Is this really what I'm seeing?" Elena tried to stammer an excuse, but her expression betrayed everything. He didn't shout. He didn't approach either. He stood there, trying to piece together something that had been broken for a long time, but only now could he see clearly. Ion, impatient, crossed his arms and made a dry comment in Moldovan, as if the situation were merely an inconvenience. Elena then took a deep breath and asked David to sit down. He laughed. He laughed at the irony. He laughed at the absurdity. Then he turned serious and said, "You lied. You brought him here pretending he was your brother. What else do you have to tell me?" Her response came like a knife, without beating around the bush, as if she had finally grown tired of pretending. She explained that they had dated in Moldova. That they had lived together even before she thought about coming to the United States. But their financial situation was suffocating, and they needed a way out. The idea came from a cousin, who had done something similar. She said that if she managed to marry an American, she could legalize her own status and, after some time, bring Ion as a relative. It was a risky move, but worth a try. They chose a state where they knew immigration controls were more lenient. She said all of this without tears, as if she had bid farewell to remorse long ago. She admitted that she had started to care for David, but that she had never stopped loving Ion. That she didn't know how to get out of it. That she had tried, but the plan was already in motion. Ion wasn't just a visitor. He had come to stay. The two had planned everything in advance. Every step, every excuse, every word. The marriage to David was part of the deal. He was the missing rung for them to start over together. David listened to everything in silence. Each sentence pushed the ground beneath his feet a little further away. He went to the hallway, opened the closet, and took out Elena's suitcase. He threw it on the floor and started packing her clothes. She tried to stop him, but he didn't even look at her. He simply said they had half an hour to leave. Ion laughed, thinking it was a bluff. But when he saw David reaching for his phone and dialing someone, the laughter disappeared. Elena insisted, saying they could talk, that he didn't need to act this way. David replied firmly, "You used my name, my home, my life. Now you'll have to deal with the consequences. She begged him to reconsider, saying she was scared, that she hadn't expected him to come home early. But none of that mattered anymore. David pointed to the door and stood there, like a guard. When they left, in a hurry and with few words, he closed the door and locked it. He sat on the living room floor, staring into nothingness. Everything he had built with hope had been constructed on a carefully orchestrated lie. The person with whom he had shared his days, dreams, and promises, was nothing more than an actress in a cold, calculated plan. At that moment, the pain was immense. But something inside him was also beginning to change. Because when the truth comes, no matter how cruel, it sets you free. And David wasn't willing to be remembered as the bridge two foreigners used to step into a country. He would be remembered as the man who had the courage to fight back. The next day, David woke up with a full head and a firmer chest. He slept little, but enough to decide what he needed to do. He spent part of the morning gathering documents, rummaging through old boxes with proof of the marriage, signed forms, messages exchanged since the time he met Elena. He separated photos, saved conversations, even screenshots of profiles and old emails. Every detail became a piece of a puzzle that, now assembled, clearly showed the image of a carefully planned scam. He took everything to the Immigration Department office. He asked to speak with someone from the Complaints Division, told the whole story calmly and objectively. He explained how he met Elena, how she arrived, the months they lived together, the supposed brother who suddenly appeared, and the moment he discovered it was all a sham. The agent who attended to him listened carefully, asked questions, took notes, analyzed the documents. David wasn't there for revenge. What he felt was different. It was as if he needed to cleanse his own life of the stain they had left behind. He wanted the peace of mind that he had done the right thing, that justice would be served based on facts, not resentment. In the following days, he received a call from immigration requesting more documents and authorizing the start of a formal investigation. From that moment on, the process followed in secrecy. David didn't know when or how they would be approached, but he trusted that the authorities would know what to do. Elena and Ion, after being kicked out by him, rented a small room in a boarding house on the outskirts of the city. They still tried to contact David in the first 2 days. She sent messages saying everything had been a mistake, that she never meant to hurt him, that she had gotten lost in her own lies. She said she felt guilty, that the love that grew afterward was real, that she wanted to explain. David read everything but didn't reply. He deleted the texts without hesitation. Trust had been destroyed at its root, and no matter how hard she tried to patch up the story, there was no more room for excuses. What she and Ion had done wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was a crime. After being caught with Ion and expelled from David's house, Elena disappeared for a few days. She didn't give explanations, didn't respond to messages from coworkers, simply vanished. When she finally showed up at the company, she went straight to the Human Resources Department. She looked worn out, with swollen eyes and a trembling voice. She didn't pass by the area where she used to work, nor did she try to find David. She simply handed in her badge and resigned in silence. She said she needed to leave, that staying there no longer made sense. She didn't explain the reasons, but everyone already knew. She left the company without saying goodbye to anyone, carrying a small bag and the weight of shame written all over her face. Less than 2 weeks after the report, Elena and Ion were surprised by 2 federal agents outside the boarding house where they were staying. The forged documents used to declare their sibling relationship, the marriage registration with David, and the chat histories revealing their clear intention to manipulate the system made the case indisputable. Both were detained, taken in for questioning, and, after providing contradictory statements, were formally charged with immigration fraud and misuse of legal benefits. The evidence provided by David directly weighed on the decision. They were deported back to Moldova with a permanent entry ban to the United States. David followed everything through notifications sent by immigration. The process moved quickly, and it wasn't long before he received an official letter thanking him for his cooperation and confirming the case closure. The letter included a formal acknowledgement that he had been a victim of a fraudulent scheme, which ensured that his citizenship and legal status wouldn't be affected. This document was the final piece he needed to fully free himself from that story. In the following months, David returned to his routine. He went back to work with his head held high, though more reserved. His co-workers noticed the difference. He, who used to be the first to strike up a conversation during breaks, now preferred silence. He spent more time alone and declined invitations to go out. Gradually, however, he began to open up again. Months later, during a conversation at work, a new colleague joked that he seemed to have luck with Eastern European women. David laughed, as he hadn't in a long time, and replied that now he preferred luck with his own peace. The colleague didn't grasp the weight of the statement, but he did. And that was enough. Over time, the memories became distant. Not erased, but repositioned. He transformed the pain into a starting point. And he never again allowed himself to be treated as disposable. Sometimes, the hardest lesson is the one that teaches us exactly what we should never accept again. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.